John Taylor Gatto. Gatto's Gatto, JohnTaylorGatto.com. And he's just an amazing individual, made documentary films, written books, done so much more. And we're going to have to get him back up again sometime because 48 minutes is not enough time. And I appreciate him coming on with us today. Sir, I'm really honored to have you on.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to be with you in Austin, which has become one of my favorite towns in the world. I have a lot of friends there, and I promise not to mention any of their names.
It doesn't matter. Listen, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you woke up to this, your life, and then just get right into the history, how they took over education, why they did it, their own words, their own documents, the sources.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania during the Second World War. It was a town not too far from Pittsburgh, and it was full of coal miners and steel workers, and there was a whole lot of value placed on simple truth and thinking for yourself. We all went to school, but nobody considered that school was going to be very important. But, as I passed through two Ivy League colleges, I bought the whole program that somehow or other the people who acquired diplomas, and especially from famous schools, are set to rule the world. So I was an advertising copywriter, and in advertising there's a lot of turnover, so often you're in between jobs. And in between jobs, my roommate had had a school teacher's license, and he said, "You got to be crazy to do that." He did it for one day, threw his license in the drawer, and went off to be a waiter at the Waldorf Astoria, and was soon making a couple $1,000s a week. This is 30 years ago, 40 years ago. So in between ad jobs, I saw that license, and I said, "I'll teach for a couple of days. Anybody can do this." I called in as my roommate. He didn't care, and I started to substitute teach. And Alex, I ran into the strangest resistance at different schools, not on the part of students, but on the part of the administration to allow the teaching to be efficient. Let me just give you one example of that, and you'll see. Like everyone in Texas, and I was in the Army in Texas a long time ago, I speak a few hundred words of Spanish. So they gave me a Spanish class to substitute in. I asked the kids if they knew how to tell time. They all said no, and I said, "Hey, it's so easy. In 15 minutes, you all know how to tell time in Spanish." That's basically about all I could do. So I go through telling time, and everybody can tell time at the end of the hour. By the third time I did this, because a sub has, the principal came in, ordered me into the hall, screamed at me that I had destroyed the entire curriculum for the month of June. She would never be able to explain it to the teacher who was that sick, but I would never be hired again at that school. And I really was bewildered that someone would think that telling time in Spanish was the whole. So this happened in a different way at another school. I won't go through the details.
And so you started searching to find out the roots of this. Let's get into the history.
Yeah. So, but I knew that this person wasn't an evil person. She just knew, what side her bread was being buttered on.
It was compartmentalization.
Yeah. So, as I taught through the years, and I told my wife, I'm going to stay in this business just to see how far I can push these kids who are supposed to be stupid. And as soon as I found the limits, I'll go back to advertising and make us a fortune. But after 30 years, I never found how far I could push them. The truth is, I went to Cornell and Columbia University and have degrees, and I began to teach on the level of graduate Ivy League college, and these 13-year-old Harlem kids. I mean, there was a little bit of problem with the idiom, and I'm much older than them, but I found that once they caught on that there was actually going to be something real going on in the class, they didn't have too much trouble keeping up. So I really was bewildered at this point now, because then I started to get into tremendous trouble with the school district because these 13-year-old Harlem kids were winning. If I tell you every award New York City had to give, and they weren't supposed to be winning those awards. So I came under heavy scrutiny, and I resigned on the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal saying I wasn't willing. I didn't think any improvement was really possible in institutional schooling, and I wasn't willing to hurt kids any longer. That was 15 years ago, and for the last 15 years, I mean 7 days a week, around the clock, I've been digging up where this institution came from, why it took the shape it took, and how it manages to continue growing larger and more expensive in the face of almost universal criticism.
Give us the brief synopsis, analysis, the basic architecture, where it came from, and then get into detail.
Well, obviously, all through human history, some people have wanted, more than their share, and they've wanted to keep other people in their place. That's human nature. It's not a conspiracy. It's the way a lot of people are. But somewhere at the beginning of the 19th century, and the somewhere was a little state in northern Germany called Prussia, which once was world famous. I mean, Washington's aide-de-camp during the Revolutionary War was a Prussian, and Prussians have appeared to draw the border between Canada and the United States in the Northwest. There's a town around Philadelphia called King of Prussia that really showed the honor in which we held Prussia. Well, at the beginning of the 19th century, Prussia decided that to have efficient management, it needed to remove the ability of ordinary people to think and of ordinary people to imagine and invent. And they drew on an ancient system that had been more or less constructed by philosophers since Plato called universal schooling. They had to force it at bayonet point or, under pain of the law, because otherwise people catch on too quickly what's going on. If their kids aren't getting smarter, they're getting dumber. So Prussia put this in place.
And this is all in mainline textbooks. This is not debatable. This is all facts. Stay there. We're going to go over it with our guest, John Taylor Gatto. I'm Alex Jones. This is the GCN Radio Network. JohnTaylorGatto.com. Documentary filmmaker, author, educator, ad man. John, continuing, now, again, this is mainline history if you study education, but the public, again, hasn't been educated, so they don't know. They haven't been taught the joy of learning, how exciting it is. By design, it's taught to be by rote, to regurgitate the kindergarten system, to actually make soldiers that would march into bayonet lines, and that was expanded out to industry. So they took that military-style training and brought it into the industry, and now they're getting it finally honed, as you know, down to specific career-based, which is a nice camouflage. They call it critical thinking in school. It's actually taught to teach you how to not have critical thinking. Continue with the history.
Okay, we're in Prussia now, and the year is 1819, and for the first time in human history, a successful universal system of forced schooling is in place. Yeah, at a teacher's college, you'll find a lot of earlier attempts, including in New England, to do this. Not one of them ever worked because there was too much common sense around. But Prussia wasn't reluctant to use bayonets. So for the first time in human history, we have this thing up and running by 1819. 10 years later, it's running like clockwork. Prussia, which has no natural resources, a small population, is the fourth richest country on earth, and its population marches into battle without argument. So everybody who was involved in trying to get the same system in the United States made the trip